Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield has been quite busy since taking office. Much of his attention is focused on battling challenges posed by the Trump administration, from birthright citizenship to funding freezes. A Democrat and a graduate of Willamette University Law School, Mr. Rayfield spent 18 years in private practice before a decade in the legislature, most recently as House Speaker. The state's top lawyer, he oversees 1,500 employees at the Oregon Department of Justice, which has more than a $500 million budget. Attorney General Dan Rayfield, welcome back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Well, thanks for having me.
Now, before you took office, you established a federal oversight and accountability cabinet to battle what you called federal overreach with the Trump administration. Did you have any idea back then that we'd be where we are now?
You know, it was very interesting when you assume this role. One of the things you talk about is protecting Oregon's values. And on election day, that became incredibly more important because you had 2 years of a presidential campaign of the Trump administration talking about the things that he was interested in doing, many of which were unconstitutional. So it was really important to us to set up this cabinet from folks like healthcare, education, labor, the environment, what I would say reproductive health, large folks that are in the community seeing the impacts of what are going on so that we can be more responsive and we can communicate better here in Oregon to protect our values.
Governor Kotek allotted about $2 million to the Oregon DOJ for court challenges to the administration's policies. Are you using any of that money yet, or how are you using that?
And the governor put additional resources in her budget. The legislature would need to pass that for us to be able to realize those resources. What we're doing right now is taking what we have, the attorneys at the Department of Justice, using them effectively. And then on top of that, we are partnering with all of the Democratic attorneys general across this country, where each state will really take the lead on various issues. And we are working to make sure that should something happen that was talked about during the campaign, or something new comes up that we don't even know that's coming up, we're prepared and can be responsive in the moment to make sure that we're protecting those values.
And that's already come into play. You and 22 other state attorneys general, you filed a suit challenging the president's executive order freezing federal grants and loans. And this week, a federal judge gave you what you would call an initial victory. So why did you join this lawsuit, and what do you think about the way it's progressing so far?
Yeah, and the one thing that I always like to say is that elections have consequences, and when you are elected president, you have a ton of powers at your disposal. The one thing that you do not get to do is violate law and break the Constitution. The president created a memo that created an absolute mess and set up a ton of chaos within state agencies across this country, where he attempted to freeze funding. We, as all of the Democratic Attorney Generals united, filed a lawsuit to say that that action was unconstitutional and that he stepped over the bounds of his authority. And a judge this week, or I believe it was the end of last week, agreed with us in that lawsuit. And so that will continue to move forward. It's a temporary restraining order that was issued, and we'll continue to fight that moving forward.
You also joined other attorneys general in taking legal action against the president's order to end birthright citizenship. This is part of his immigration crackdown. Again, a federal judge has blocked that order for now. Why are we so interested in that issue here in the state of Oregon?
This is every child that is born in our country should have a home and should have a place and should be access to services. We really need to protect children in that same space. What the president did is, with the stroke of the pen, attempted to rewrite our Constitution. For more than 120 years, we have had the 14th Amendment, and for more than 120 years, you've had consistent judicial interpretation of that. You have had consistent presidential interpretation, different administrations, Democrats and Republicans. With the stroke of the pen, the Trump administration attempted to rewrite that constitutional provision. If you want to have that policy conversation about ending birthright citizenship, you should do that in Congress. You should do that among the states. You, as the president and the executive, do not, under any circumstances, get to rewrite Oregon or the United States Constitution.
Well, it seems like there's been a fire hose of news just coming from the Trump administration in terms of executive orders and his statements of what he wants to do. I want to get your thoughts thoughts on the purge at the FBI among those involved in the January 6th investigations, and also the firings of inspectors general who oversee federal agency workings?
Well, I'm deeply concerned about those actions. I think on the inauguration, the president came out and spoke about how he didn't want to weaponize or politicize the Department of Justice. Coming in with that many firings and layoffs does exactly just that. I think a lot of the actions really are tilting towards politicizing the Department of Justice. When you lay off that many people, think about it in our own city, in our own county. When you do that, there is an implication and an impact on community safety across this nation. And I think that's the thing. If I was someone in a community, that's where my focus is. And that's where my focus is where I sit here today about those incredible partnerships that we have on the national scale with local law enforcement as we're trying to impact things like fentanyl and drug delivery across our country.
How much of your time are these issues taking right now? How focused are you on battling these challenges from the Trump administration? And is it taking some of your attention away from issues that are more specific to the state?
No, I think it's incredibly important that you enforce these values and that I am an active voice for Oregonians when our rights are being threatened. But at the same time, you cannot let that be at the expense of enforcing, our rights for consumers, seniors, working families. That has to remain front and center. The work to keep communities safe, that has to go on. And so really what this does is it adds an additional workload onto an already busy schedule. And I'm committed to doing it all, not at the expense of any of it.
Your predecessor at the DOJ, Ellen Rosenblum, sued or joined in lawsuits against major corporations, including Google, Fox, Corporation, Monsanto, Apple, among others. Do you plan on continuing that trend? And are there any companies or corporations that you have your eyes on now?
Ken, you want me to tell these corporations live on TV who I'm coming after?
Well, if you would.
No, but in truth, the prior Attorney General did an absolute wonderful job in really enforcing our values when it comes to consumers. I want to build on that work. That's my background in my civil practice. I spent 18 years of my life working on behalf of individuals. I get to do that on behalf of a state now. And that is something that I couldn't be more excited to do. We're going to be working with the legislature to make sure that we have the resources we need to expand that work. Right now, you'd be surprised to know that we have about 9 individuals that do consumer protection for the state. Washington has in excess of 35 individuals doing this work. We turn down cases with frequency in this state of things that I think we should be moving forward with. So you're going to see that I want to build on the work of the great work of our prior Attorney General and expand in this area so that consumers know that they have an Attorney General, that they have a Department of Justice in this state that always has their back.
We're about 3 weeks into the legislative session now. Do you have any legislative priorities or bills that you're following in the legislature right now?
Absolutely. One of the things we want to do, again, is going to be focusing on expanding our work for consumer protection. And that is going to be a big focus for us. Another set of focus for us is going to be public safety and being a better partner with law enforcement, local, as well as our district attorneys, and very importantly, our federal law enforcement as well, as we look at things like drug delivery, retail theft, things that are really cropping up in all of our communities. And then finally, we'll be working on making sure that we have a good foundation at the Department of Justice for all of our employees so that they can continue to do their work.
Attorney General Dan Rayfield, thanks for being on Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks for having me.